where do you think you are in that process, and what is the end goal? Probably isn't an end goal. It's just a perpetual state, but I imagine you still have room to grow or places that you want to go.
Yeah, I don't even think I've scratched the surface. And so the working on the self-love is still, it's like a massive iceberg. And you think of, you're setting your patterns, your beliefs, your thoughts, they're based on actions that happened when you were a child. And so those patterns are so well ingrained. I started my journey at 30. And so turning those like underlying subconscious beliefs that generate your thoughts around, it's an effort. And so, still for me, what changed first was my actions. And sometimes I wonder, have I changed at all? But then I look back and I've been sober for so long. Now I don't care about making money like I used to. I don't have material things like I used to, and I don't feel different, but those actions have changed. In my community, I'm like super high integrity person. I'm a leader. I have like tons of friends. I'm helping them like all the time. And so those are things that I just didn't care about before, or maybe I did care, but they were like deeply covered by hurts and rejections and failures. And so accepting those and letting them go, I feel now like I'm working on firstly my ultimate passion. Like this thing changed my life. So now I'm giving it to others. So I get to create these beautiful ceremonies I had mentioned, like amazing breathworks, choosing the scripts and the music and learning. Last weekend, I dove deep and did 2 breathwork courses. Okay, I'm learning about the foundational benefits of breathing. Like how cool, that's my job. So it's just so, I get to talk to you on like a podcast, tell my story. It's so awesome and fun. And so I'm very grateful, but at the same time, I can still get stuck in old habits of like working too hard. So we're trying to launch 2 businesses now. We're opening a second space, a more legit version with a 40-person sauna, crazy nightclub sound system, 4 ice baths, tea room, and it's going to be our big like flagship launch. And so we've just started construction on that. We're aiming to open in September, and it's a lot. There's interior design and branding and operations and financing and like dealing with the lease. And we have this space to think about. And then there's breathwork. So I'm trying to get the word out. I'm trying to go on podcasts and talk to influencers and just share the message. And so I can easily sit down, have a coffee, and spend 12 hours working. Like this never stops. And that's what I mentioned, like it's constant stimulation. And so I know in my mind, I have a number of practices, the hot cold, I'm doing meditation daily still. I like light therapy. I have a bunch of things that try to just take an hour off per day to do something where I'm not thinking. So maybe I just go for a walk. I love riding electric skateboard in the summer. That's one of the things that like makes me feel the best. I have a handpan, some type of activity that's fun, or like a game that's going to allow the brain to stop. I have like little tools I use around my desk to improve my breathing patterns, but I can still be like, oh, I'm so excited to build this thing. Let's go. Let's talk to more people. Let's try something new and let's hire more people. It's so fun. So I think one of the biggest things is just having patience. And that's, again, it's like, why do I need to build all these things? Partly to help people, but it's partly because I want to prove to myself that I'm successful. And so that same feeling is still there. It's just no longer manifesting itself in like cocaine and all-nighters and like doing something that I don't like. So
what was that little tool that you just held up a second ago?
Oh, it's called the Relaxator. It's from this like breathing legend. He's been in the breathing game for 20 years. His name's Anders Olsen. He wrote a book called Conscious Breathing. And so he's one of the first to talk about, he's actually in James Nestor's recent book, Breath, which if you want to learn more, it's like the best starting point. And so him and Anders Olsen go to a university, maybe it was Stanford, and they do a test where they mouth breathe for a number of days. And they show the impact mouth breathing has on the body, which is insane, like super bad. And so this tool he's created, you put in your mouth while you're working. And when you're working, every time you're getting a Slack message, an email, you're getting stimulated and you're tending to breathe through your chest. Or if you're concentrating, you hold your breath and you'll really mess up your breathing patterns. And as a result, you put this in your mouth. When you breathe out, it creates friction and it maintains. So if you're looking at your computer 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day, it's going to help you maintain your breathing patterns without thinking too much about it. So personally love the device, really cool. I'm using it in the day. I'm taping my mouth at night. Yes, huge believer.
So what's actually happening that makes breath work so powerful? Is it all about controlling your heart rate, or are there other things that are happening?
Yeah, would be similar to you asking me like what makes exercise valuable or what makes diet valuable. There's many different styles. And so I can go into a few, But the main one is your foundational breathing. And a metric to measure foundational breathing is your CO2 tolerance or VO2 max. So CO2 tolerance is how much carbon dioxide your body can hold before breathing out. This is a sensor in your brain that's measuring the amount of carbon dioxide in your body. And when it hits a certain percentage of the blood oxygen levels, you'll breathe out. And so what's really interesting is when you breathe in oxygen, comes into the lungs, it's picked up by the blood goes to the organs. The hemoglobin in the blood holds that oxygen, delivers it to your brain, your heart, your stomach, all your organs. And if you don't have enough carbon dioxide, it's called the Bohr effect. The blood will hold on tightly to the oxygen. It won't deliver it effectively. So you can actually measure this with the CO2 tolerance test. You can Google it, or you can just in the morning breathe in once, breathe out once, and hold your breath. When your diaphragm contracts, it's telling you like, hey, that's when you need to breathe out.
Your limit.
So if it's under 20 seconds, your breathing patterns are poor. And why might your breathing patterns be poor? Generally through mouth breathing. And why does that happen? Because you're eating processed foods, acidic forming foods. You need to breathe out carbon dioxide to reset the pH levels of the blood. So that's, one reason. Another one, you're stressed all the time. Your fight or flight system is on. It's not meant to be stimulated all the time. When it's stimulated, it can sometimes take an hour to breathe back into a relaxed state. So you're stressing the nervous system, you're breathing through the chest. All the nerves connected to the fight or flight nervous system are in the top of the chest. So you get stressed, you breathe in the chest, you breathe out too much carbon dioxide, and this CO2 tolerance just goes down over time. And so most people, especially even athletes, like they do this test and it's under 20. It's not an acceptable rate. And so it's impacting sleep, it's impacting anxiety. So foundational breathing, using something like mouth tape, holding your breath, we have exercises around this, or using something like the Relaxator is going to slow the breathing. It's going to improve the amount of carbon dioxide in the body, and it's going to boost your body's ability to tolerate higher levels of carbon dioxide. So that's great. That's like sporting or foundational style. Then you have these psychedelic breathworks like holotropic, you may have heard of, Wim Hof. They're all using super ventilation, hyperventilation. And what's happening, your body's breathing out so much carbon dioxide. So you'll sit there for, in some of them, 3 hours, and just as fast as you can. And what's happening, you're breathing out so much carbon dioxide, the blood vessels actually constrict. The blood holds on to the oxygen, shuts down the oxygen delivery to the brain. The neocortex, the part of the brain that creates identity, shuts down. And you're in a state almost similar, there's no scientific proof around this, but you're in a state almost similar to death. And as a result, all of these emotions start to come up. And that style of breathing kicks in the fight or flight system. So you're creating this activation of the nervous system. And then when you're shutting down the mind, you're allowing these stored emotions, these stored traumas to come up. So you see like very powerful effects with people with PTSD. I've seen thousands of people, crazy stuff happening where they're releasing yells, screams, movements,
just from doing breath work.
Just from breath work. Yeah. You could have a legit in that holotropic style, full blown psychedelic level experiences where people report going back before their birth, like very wild things. Whereas a, skeptical person would be like, what? But when you experience it yourself, at a minimum, stored emotions come up and are released, and you just feel amazing after. And so that can be done even in a 30-minute state using transformational techniques, Wim Hof techniques. So I think that is, when you're talking about meditation, that style of breathing has gotten very popular because you can feel these emotions. So we like to combine that style of breathing with amazing music. And then when you're in that state of that brain shutdown, we start to do a guided visualization, and you can really feel the visualization because you're not thinking and ruminating. And for many people to focus on the breath to the beat, it's much easier than just, hey, sit there and notice your thoughts. So it's just like the best, most accessible first step towards boosting your mood, feeling better.
I've definitely heard that before, that holotropic breath work in particular can get you to these states similar to a psychedelic experience, and have been skeptical. Have obviously heard a lot of anecdotal examples of that, but I think your explanation just now about what's actually happening in your body and your blood vessels constricting and oxygen not going to certain parts of your brain, like that clicks. That makes a lot of sense. Why it's like physiologically happening that way. Is there any physical danger to some of this breath work?
So if you're pregnant, you will feel something called tetany. Your hands will claw up. You'll feel temperature changes in the body. You'll feel your mouth potentially go dry. And I don't think there's any danger in terms of damage. And generally what people feel is like frustration, blockages, and they start doing it and say, I'm afraid to go further. And they just modulate the breath, come back to normal. There is, and so oftentimes we tell people, like, if you're feeling that frustration, you're feeling that blockage, a lot of times that's when the biggest breakthroughs are about to happen. It's like going into that fear and letting it go. There is some danger in that this style of breathing is turning on the fight or flight system. It's initially sending blood to the brain, your body's, sending blood to the muscles. It's in a stressed state. And so this is the same thing that's happening during trauma, right? So if you think of, here's a good example, a nice analogy from this legend in the trauma space, Peter Levine, who created somatic experiencing, but he would talk about a deer or a gazelle on the safari in the woods eating. It hears, a twig break, and boom, it's in, like, ready to run.
Yeah.
Now, if there's no lion there, nothing happens. It goes back to normal. If there is a lion, maybe there's a chase. In that chase, the deer escapes. It will then sit on the ground and shiver out the traumatic release and let that emotional response get out of its system. For human beings, we don't do that. We store the emotional response. And as I said before, there's a lot of research and beliefs around storing these traumas or emotional responses at the cellular level. So you think of something that happened to you that was traumatic. You can remember back to a time you felt awkward, unsafe. Perhaps it was at work. Someone made fun of you. You got rejected. You failed at something. That feeling in the body is stoic. You can feel it. Like, your body tenses, your breath changes. And so when you do this style of breath work, you're turning on the fight or flight system, and then you're allowing your body to release these stored emotions. It's like amazing for clearing emotions. But for some people, especially who've had very traumatic experiences, if there's not a guide present or somebody with trauma training, I can bring up very strong emotions, especially holotropic it's 2 years of training. It's a 3-hour ceremony. You sit for someone, they sit for you. They open and close the ceremony. It's very strict with the exact protocol. And it's because you can release these emotional traumas. So just want to make sure, if you feel uncomfortable, that you have somebody available to chat with who has experience.